Patch 9146828 has brought with it the ability to have a stable enough Vulkan to bring direct 3D 11 versus Vulkan into full view, and upscaling is actually doing an incredible amount of work now. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Thank the subscribers. So right now you're looking at the 66% upscales on NVIDIA's side. So this is the DLSS 3.7 API backed system. And once again, I am using a area that I can kind of have controlled environment that has a lot of shadows, that has a lot of lighting effects, and is purposely taxing on the system and has close targets as well as far away targets that the system has to render. My settings are mostly on very high and high, and it is the same as my previous runs. This is on purpose to kind of show the improvements. You can see the FPS counter in the top right corner that's dipping into the 70s, 71s, and such. And this is on Direct 3D 11. I left this in just to show my processes. For others who are doing these, this is on FSR now. We switched over from DLSS. I want to stress to try to think of controlled environments and run through each and every one of them on the same thing. Showing a bar that just has a number of FPS is not really ideal because it's like an FPS average or it's a peak number of frames per second, and you're not giving it like all the different environments you're going to see. Now, granted, I'm not either, but at least I'm showing you a whole bevy of different challenges for a GPU to render and maybe give a more fair estimate. Don't forget to use the chapters if you just want to jump ahead to Vulkan. Warning, there is a slight flicker. It is nowhere near as bad as it was in the last one, so I feel confident in showing it just with that warning. You will note that FSR has I would argue, a little more challenge with the lighting effects in the hallways, particularly when it's playing across the character or on the plants that we walk past. These things tend to be difficult, though, because DLSS and FSR are doing amazing. I'm sorry if you're rooting for one side or the other, but as long as you have upscaling on this, in my case, it's a 4070 Ti, not super, it seems to be rendering extremely well. So my build, as a reminder, is a 7800X3D, 64 gigs of RAM, an M.2 SSD. It's like a 980 or a 990 SSD and, from Samsung, and also a 4070 Ti. Now, upscaling is not going to give you just a big FPS number in the counter. It does, by the way, on this build, but it's not what it's really all about. It's kind of smoothing things out, how it's dealing with blurs in the frames, and it just seems like it has less of a stutter effect. So those 1% drops on the frames and such, you know, what are those numbers coming to? I think it's like the bigger picture. Vulkan DLSS, as a reminder, this is a flicker warning. This is at 66% quality, as were the ones in the Direct 3D 11. I just wanted to be fully fair and not try to give one side more advantage than the other when it comes to renderers or the type of upscaler you choose. So in this case, you'll note that, I mean, we're once again, because of the upscaling, we're starting to see numbers that are just about to peak to 70. And once again, this is a challenging location. I purposely picked challenging locations. If you recall, when we looked outside, at least with the no upscaling on the Direct 3D 11 side, it was in like the FPS was in the mid 40s, whereas you can see here it's easily in the mid 50s-ish. And I strongly urge you to go back to these and use the chapters to jump around and compare and contrast the type of builds you're looking for or you think will work for you, because you know, it's not just about the number in the corner. It's about the feel of it. You'll note that you will see the upscaling has a dramatic improvement in the hallway lighting playing across the character. That's something that I've seen as a across the board situation. Here it is in FSR at 66% quality. If you haven't been in 3.23 yet, the 66% I keep going on about is when you pick up scaling, you turn it on, you have to choose which level upscaling you want, or you can choose it to stay auto. I recommend picking 66%, which is the quality level, because the whole reason you're using upscaling is to try to enhance the picture and help your GPU make you have a better experience. Another one that you may want to consider is the in-between. It's like balanced. I think it's called 50% balanced. But I didn't see that much of a difference. So little of a difference, I didn't even put it in this video. I did have a very short clip of 33% high performance just to see, like, hey, would I get like crazy frame rates off of this? And the answer is no. It is possible that there isn't enough learning time. It's not enough time for processing for these large behemoths that are from AMD and NVIDIA respectively to have enough information to have these different builds going. I have a personal theory. It's just a personal theory that there is a drop in the overall ability of each one of these percentages that will come over time. Like you'll lose frame rate in exchange for quality over time, or vice versa. And I think that there's probably only one set. Like they wanted to stabilize one set of upscalings for FSR, one scale for TSR, the CIG's home cook version, and then also DLSS. And I feel like I'm on to something there. I would love to see an Inside Star Citizen where the team goes in there, both the rendering and the graphics teams kind of wander in and kind of give a good spectrum view, you know, like a spectrum Q&A, and then they go into there and they give a good view of on the show of like where we're at, because it really is a huge thing for a lot of people. You'll note again that we're hitting into the 70s and 80s in FPS, and then it drops back down as I challenge it into more challenging environments where you have these large cityscapes that has to draw all the way off into the distance, and I have high settings that are forcing it to see these things, cloud effects, all sorts of crazy things that are here, and they do have an impact. Once again, we are trying to scrape this and force it to think harder, and then we can see progress. You know, we want to see the results get better and better over time. I can go to places where I can get into the high 80s and just sit there and point at it and go, see? Like right here, you can see it even peaks at 91.2, 90. It's like it's going crazy on that. FSR really enjoys sitting right below the light. Like once it hits the light and it actually plays across it and there's very little to update, it seems like it really just enjoys it. It's like, okay, I'm here now. I'm good to go. So this was a short test of 33% high performance, literally extremely short. And this is another one that I did, another 66%. This is with a 100% sharpness, and this was a request from previous posters that suggested, hey, what about sharpening? I've tried it in the past. I've had luck with it, so I wanted to add it as a tool for them. I personally do not roll with 100% sharpness. I prefer it without that, but you can see 86, 87s in the good spot that's like really good for the upscaler. This is our Vulkan run without any upscaling. I want you to keep a close eye on that FPS counter, even though I just went on and on about how it's not a good idea to. You're going to see a lot of 50s and 60s sitting in there, especially as the lights play across the character and on those plants and other things that are in the area. One thing I want to stress is the flickering is not in the build. Like when I'm staring at it, note that the light outside is having a hard time. That little vehicle is skipping across the skyline, but the flickering is only in my capture, and it is a glitch that seems to be in just the EPTU, which is now at wave 2. But I just want to stress that when I'm watching this and I'm using these with and without the upscalers on Vulkan, there is no flickering that I can see. There is still some issues with ship UI and stuff that they're still working on. They have fixed some of it, but some of it's still an issue, but just note that. So do cite, though, note that the massive jump in difference in the FPS. I mean, places that we are literally seeing up to 20 FPS, 20 FPS jump. And yes, I just got done saying that FPS is situational, and think of your 1%, think of this and that. But at the end of the day, it is getting extremely noticeable to see the difference between upscaling and not upscaling. And that is a huge benefit. As multiple commenters have noted, upscaling does have drawbacks. And having, you know, it being done live, so to speak, without any assistance at all, just your card doing its job, is nice if you have like a 4090 or something. But for everybody else, having upscaling as an option in your back pocket to have a smoother experience is great. And if there's least upsides as possible, more upsides than downsides, it's probably a great idea. If you missed everything else, I highly recommend DLSS 66% and FSR 66% if you're on NVIDIA, and see which one you like better. And if you're on AMD, go FSR 66% and just be happy, because they're both great. You're not going to go wrong with either one. It's just really more of a pick your M&M. You're gonna have a good time either way. You're gonna have a good chocolate either way. I will also. This is just another theory of mine that I wanted to mention, though, is upscaling. I think that if there's anywhere that's going to be upscaled first, that's going to really be treated well and have a lot of attention to make it good, it's going to be places like planetary landing locations, the 4 main planetary landing locations that players will be in, day out. I also think that the next target location that they're really going to try to perfect is ships, because you spend a large percentage of your time standing inside a ship, walking around the ship. So, and that's not a bad thing. You see, I thought about this at first. I was like, aha, I've got them now. And I thought about it and I was like, you know what? If I was going to do an upscaler, I would pick, like, what is the 75% of the time players spend time in? It's in the planetary landing locations, logging into these things. It's in the ships. And then I would start focusing down, like, large mission-giving locations. Maybe outposts that are at the jump point near Pyro, because that's going to be very popular, you know, in a few more patch cycles. So it got me thinking, like, it would make sense to hit these hotspots, because that's where the players are going to be. And that's the whole point, right? If players have a better experience, there's nothing wrong with that. So I find it interesting. I'm no expert on graphics or anything or rendering, but I do want to note that I feel like there might be a situation here where you're going to see the first progress be made at these locations, and we seem to see it here, which is good. So that's kind of my perspective right now on 3.23, patch 9146828 on ePTU, which is now at wave 2. Please get in there if you can. I hope your wave comes soon. If you're not able to jump in, the water's fine. The flickering on Vulkan is only on the capture. I did not see it personally while I was making these. So I should have iterated that earlier. I'm going to add that in post. But the point is that a lot of these things are coming. Bear with the system, and above all, get in there and test. Make the game as great as you want it to be. Have a good one.